Thank you, Chairman. We're now live streaming. I'll hand the meeting over to yourself. Thank you.
Very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Breckland Council's virtual planning committee meeting for today. Before I go on to procedure, I hope you'll all join me in a minute's silence for the loss of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sure if His Royal Highness was here today, well, we wouldn't be doing this, but he would say he doesn't need all this fuss and bother. But there, we're doing our bit to show our gratitude for the service he's put in over the years. Thank you very much, members. So first of all, this meeting will be live streamed on the council's social media channels and will be recorded. Once you join the meeting, please remain on mute, which avoids any unnecessary background noise disturbing the meeting. Controls to mute and unmute are displayed on your screen. At the end of this presentation, I will ask Julie Britton, our Democratic Services Officer, to take the roll call to confirm attendance. Could you please ensure that your attendance and then mute your microphone, as no response will assume that a planning committee member is not in the meeting. Each application has an allotted time slot. There may be an occasion when the time runs over, and therefore attendees will remain in the waiting room until such time their application is ready to be heard. If for any reason the discussion finishes earlier than the time slot given, the meeting will be paused. I will work through the agenda, inviting the ward member, applicant, etc. to introduce and speak on each item as appropriate. Attendees for each application will be held in the waiting room until such time the application is heard. Ward members in attendance who have registered to speak on an application will be asked to speak last. A speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes, or in the case of more than one objector or supporter wishing to speak, up to a maximum of the 3 minutes in total will need to be shared. Where an applicant and their agent intend to speak, the 3 minutes is split between the two, other than when speaking. Speakers will remain on mute. If you try to speak, I will then check the Democratic Services Officer in attendance. If there are any members who wish to ask a question, please do this clearly by raising your hand, and please remain on mute until invited to speak. Members with a declaration should indicate this by raising their hand. The Democratic Service Officer in attendance will invite the councillor to unmute and declare their interest to the chairman. This councillor will, at the relevant time, be removed from the meeting and placed in the virtual waiting room until the discussion and voting on that item has completed, after which they will return to the meeting. Once the application has been discussed and all questions answered, the Democratic Service Officer will then invite each councillor to speak in turn. If any member should experience IT issues during the presentation and does not ask for it to be repeated, they will be unable to vote on the application. For each item, all members will need to confirm that they have heard the application in full before the vote is taken. So could I ask our Democratic Services Officer, Julie Britton, please, to take the roll call for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson.
Here.
Councillor Atterwill.
Here.
Councillor Bowes.
Here.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Here.
Councillor Crane.
Present.
Councillor Dale.
Present.
Councillor Dygan.
Here.
Councillor Gilbert,
Here.
Councillor Kybird,
Here.
and Councillor Martin.
Here.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay. First item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March 2021. Could I have a show of hands that you're all accepting of those minutes, please? Show of hands, please. Everyone's accepting of them. Thank you very much. Those minutes are passed. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. Do you know if we have any at all, please?
Chairman,
Julie?
we have none. No apologies.
No, we don't. Okay, thank you. No, that's lovely. Item 3, declarations of interest and representations received. We'll take them as each item is raised. Item 4, chairman's announcements. We have site visits coming up, of which details will be sent to you shortly. Okay, anyone, I've had some contact as to when and where and what have you, so you will be getting that information very soon. Do we have any requests to defer items within this agenda? Over to you, please.
Yes, please, Chairman. And we would like to defer item 9C at Shipdham, 3PL 2020-0906F. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Make a shorter day even shorter. Item 6, urgent business. Do we have any items of urgent business, please, Rebecca?
None today, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'll take a shake of the head as no, that's fine. Item 7, we have local plan. I believe we should have somewhere on my screen Simon Wood to take this, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There was a request at the last meeting from Councillor Atwell for a short report in terms of the work that we're currently doing on the local plan. I haven't been able to facilitate a short report, but I have sent Councillor Atwell, and it was only this morning, so apologies to him, a list of the items that we are doing at the moment, and I can circulate that to members after the meeting, and they can contact me if they have any queries on that. Just to clarify and to summarise the note, we are undertaking work with New Buckingham, Same Tony and Necton on neighbourhood planning. We are also, in relation to the local plan, looking at the scope of the review. We are doing work on timetabling and resources. We're seeking to update the rural settlement study and looking to do preparatory work on the model design guide. There is also work on the implications of the environment bill and other planning consultations that are coming through at the moment. We're updating the statement of community involvement and carrying out initial work on the housing needs assessment. We also do work with partner authorities, including the Norfolk Strategic Planning Group, which consists of other districts, the county and other interested bodies. And that's looking at green infrastructure strategy, which will have implications for the local plan and for development management as well. And we are actively involved in putting that together with our colleagues in other authorities. We're also looking at climate change and an older person study through that group, as well as the planning framework update, which again seeks to inform the infrastructure work that we will be hoping to bring forward through our local plan, as well as forming part of the duty to cooperate as well. We're also part of a group that is looking at 5G throughout the county and the district as well. Other work streams that the planning policy team is involved with include the brownfield land register. We're also working with colleagues in housing to do an affordable housing supplementary planning document, as well as clarifying policy ENV04 within the local plan in relation to open space. We are advising Attleborough on their design guide, and we're also working with Natural England on Great Crested Newt's brief on the new district licensing scheme. We are part of Water Resources East and feed into their work. And we are also actively working with Highways England and the county on the Norwich Western Link Road and the A47 dualling work, which is now with the National Casework organisation at the Planning Inspectorate. We are also involved in consultations on the Greater Norwich Local Plan, the National Model Design Codes, all the changes to the National Planning Policy Framework and to the New Homes Bonus. We have just started work on our housing monitoring and 5-year housing land supply updates, as well as other monitoring to enable us to update our annual monitoring report. As I said, I will circulate this list to Julie after the meeting, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Atterwell and then Councillor Gilbert, please.
Just to say thank you very much, Simon, for sending through that list for me this morning. I will look at it in more depth. I'm sure there may be some questions I have from that, but I very much look forward to seeing the timetables and resources element with regard to the local plan. But this is a good start and I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chairman. Do you anticipate, Simon, that the work will be completed in time for the deadline in November?
I hesitate to answer purely on the basis that I don't really know the answer as yet. The work we're doing on the timetabling and the resources will inform that view. At the moment, we're looking at options as to how we can address that particular policy within the local plan, and I would hope that in the next 4 to 6 weeks I will be able to be much more definitive in terms of responding to that particular question, Councillor Gilbert. Apologies, I'm not able to answer it at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I suspect the Chairman may have frozen.
I think he's looking forward to you getting that 5G sorted out, Simon.
He's not the only one, Councillor. Not the only one.
Councillor Wilkinson, maybe you could do the next item, agenda item 8. That's the deferred applications. And you're on mute. Sorry, Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, I had my reports up. Yeah, item 8 on the agenda, deferred applications. Could you repeat that one again for Shipton, I believe it was?
Yeah,
Rebecca.
So, yeah, absolutely. So we've requested the chairman to defer item 9C at Shipton, and that was agreed. And we have no deferred items from earlier committees to be heard today. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Item 9 on the agenda then, schedule of planning applications. So we're going to start, I believe, Becky, at Garbolisham, 3PL 2020 05440.
Just to intervene, Councillor Wilkinson, if you don't mind first, is as the sites at Garbolisham are directly adjacent to each other and essentially have been considered as one allocated site, we're going to take both applications 9A and 9B together in terms of the officer presentation and the elements of right to speak. And at the end, members will have 2 votes, one on 9A and one on 9B. And obviously the case officer, Fiona, will explain the 2 sites as she goes through her presentation. I hope that's okay with you.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Fiona, if you'd like to take that forward now, please. Thank you. Your presentation. Good afternoon.
Sorry, good afternoon. You're quite right. So we have the two planning applications today for sites that are immediately adjacent to each other, and they're owned by the same landowner and have the same applicant. So we have an outline planning application for 10 dwellings, and we have a full application for a modern earth block dwelling in Garbolsham off Hopton Road. So the land is currently grazing land, and the outline application is 0.47 hectares and the full application is 0.48 hectares. And it forms the southern part of the Garbolsham housing allocation. So you can see where it says 004, they form that part of the allocation, the southern 2/3. And land to the north has planning permission outline for 7 dwellings, and that was granted in November 2019. That was actually for 7 dwellings when, to meet the minimum allocation requirements, they would have needed to provide 10 dwellings. And the applicant has put forward that the reason for this was because of the ground type meant that it wasn't financially or structurally viable to develop 10 dwellings because the west half of the site wasn't suitable in terms of its ground and water levels. Having examined the correspondence provided and the committee report, it doesn't appear that the council agreed with that specific point, and instead they approved it with a deviation from the allocation because of the lack of 5-year land housing supply and the tilted balance. And that is the indicative plan that was provided with that approved outline application. So moving on to the current applications, this is the outline application land for 10 dwellings with details of access only. And this is where the full planning application is. So you can see they're immediately abutting each other. So we have an indicative site plan that shows how one access could be provided and how 10 units could be accommodated for the outline application. And then we have the detailed plans for the full application, which is quite a large 5-bedroom dwelling with a flat roof. And here they've helpfully provided a visualization so you can see the design. It's not particularly in keeping with the area, and it would be quite a large dwelling that would be angled in such a way that you wouldn't necessarily see it as a gateway feature of the settlement as you come into Garbolsham. They're proposing that it's going to be clay lump, which is actually a traditional material that's quite sustainable. It's unfired block work, and that is a positive material consideration in its favour, and it's something that is currently being researched in the UK and wider in terms of whether it's a sustainable and usable material, so that would be quite helpful. And they're saying that it's an NPPF paragraph 79 dwelling and that it's isolated, innovative, exceptional. However, in our view, it's not an isolated dwelling because it is adjacent to the village and would be adjacent to the allocation once built. It also, in our view, wouldn't significantly enhance its setting as it's not a particularly sensitive design to the locality, and the way that it's positioned within the site wouldn't provide that benefit. So whilst it's material consideration, we're not, in our view, that doesn't outweigh the harm caused by not meeting the allocation requirements. So the site is on the left-hand side in this photograph, and you can see Thomas Ball Close on the right-hand side. And that's Thomas Ball Close dwellings. The south site. So today we are recommending refusal on a number of reasons. The one which is the most key is that it's not providing the minimum number of dwellings required by the allocation. Across the 2 sites, there's a shortfall of 12 dwellings. So that's 2 on the outline site and 10 on the full application. And so that's a significant deviation from the allocation. And it also isn't allocation requires that the site together is master planned. That hasn't happened, so it means that the drainage strategy, the layouts, the levels and the landscaping hasn't been put forward in a comprehensive way and is instead two parcels. In terms of physically, what we're missing out therefore is that they're not providing the local area of play required by the policy. They're not providing a more sustainable drainage strategy, potentially. And they also are not providing as many affordable homes as they could do if they provided the allocation amount. Their justification for this is that they're saying the western half of the site isn't developable because it's peat and because the water levels are quite high. They have provided some information to suggest that could be the case, but not enough to demonstrate that is most likely the case. That's both in terms of viability. We have done a viability assessment allowing for deeper piles rather than raft foundations. However, that's saying it is viable. And the site investigation they provided doesn't provide enough information for us to say you're correct, this isn't viable or structurally possible to build. So therefore, we don't have sufficient reason to agree that they should deviate from the policy so significantly. The last two issues are specifically for the outline application. It's 10 dwellings and they haven't provided a drainage strategy and flood risk assessment, and this is required for major applications. So that it's not in accordance with our adopted development plan policy ENV or 9 or national guidance. And they're also proposing free starter homes for affordable, which is not in accordance with our affordable housing policy, which requires rental affordable units and intermediate part sale, part rent. And for these reasons, we are therefore recommending refusal of both applications today. Thank you.
I was part out of that because of my computer, so I'm going to let Peter continue with this as the Vice Chairman. Just to let Peter know that the speaker is Sarah Roberts, has been agreed to have 4 minutes to cover both applications. Over to you, please, Peter.
Thank you for that presentation, Fiona. Hopefully all members heard that fully, apart from the chairman. I'd like to now invite Sarah Roberts, who is the agent for these applications. You have 4 minutes, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. This site is not physically suitable for a small housing estate of 23 dwellings. If the application before the committee is refused, there will not be another submission and there will be no development in the foreseeable future. The committee voted unanimously in favour of the reduced ribbon development style scheme on the adjacent land, and the local plan allocation required a master plan approach. We undertook formal pre-application consultation with Chris Hobson, who also acknowledged the unsuitability of the back of the site based upon the ground investigations which were carried out after the site allocation and before any application was made. These investigations were undertaken with the responsible approach to make sure the site would be attractive to house builders before going through the planning process. Although the district valuer would like to see the site developed for 23 houses, no developer is going to build a housing estate on a 10-metre deep peat bed. We have done all we can to bring this site forward and can do no more. We know there is an alternative developable site for up to 12 units on the other side of Hopton Road. A formal pre-application response has been received acknowledging that site would be viable if the current application site cannot deliver Galboldisham's allocation. We've followed the traditional ribbon development as approved on the adjacent site. We've increased the proposal from 7 to 10 dwellings, including 3 1- and 2-bedroom affordable units, which are desperately needed in all rural areas. The way we could increase the proposal to 10 dwellings at the front of the site during the application was by using only one highways access. The planning officer has used her personal dislike for the modern design of the single house, which is proposed on the worst area of ground at the southern area for viability reasons, to support her recommendation for refusal. I quote from an email received last year. My view is that the appearance of the dwelling is not visually attractive. In her report, she refers us to the 1980s council houses opposite and surrounding standardised 20th century houses for inspiration. She even specifies a pitched roof should be added. The only other earth block, environmentally experimental and groundbreaking building the planning officer could find in the country is at the Centre for Alternative Technology, which won a prestigious RIBA award, and the judges said the word sustainability is frequently used. This project not only lives up to the Centre's, that's the Centre for Alternative Technology's mission, but does so with a quiet confidence. Many such buildings flaunt their green credentials. This building doesn't and is a delight as a result. The proposed house has been carefully thought through, using orientation, layout and materials to dictate its environmental credentials. East Anglia has a strong tradition of clay lump buildings and could be important in its reintroduction into the mainstream. As an executive committee member of the national body Earth Buildings UK and Ireland, I'm active in promoting the use of earth construction. One of the many international reports on the use of earth-based construction states that more money has been spent on research and reports in the developed world than on actual buildings built. We're trying to redress this and make this material mainstream for future generations. Of course, there are many houses in the surrounding area built up to the 1920s in this material. Breckland should be excited to be involved in this movement, which will assist with addressing both pollution and global warming. The Parish Council acknowledge the physical constraints and appreciate the inclusion of more affordable houses to purchase. That was their comment. A drainage strategy will clearly be developed once the principle of development is established. I'm personally convinced that if the original planning officer had carried on with this application after our successful pre-application consultation, that we would not be coming to you now with a recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts, for that. Can I ask all members if you heard all of the presentation? I have a question from Councillor Chapman-Allen.
No, Vice Chairman, it wasn't, and Rebecca had her hand up. I just wish to speak on the item, Chairman.
Okay, I haven't got you on the list as an official speaker.
No, Chairman, part of the committee.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I will come into that at the moment. Yes, so you've all confirmed that you've all heard the full reports from the officer and the speaker. Thank you. I will go to questions now from members, and I will start with Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen. Thank you.
Sorry, Vice Chairman. Rebecca Collins wanted to come in first.
Sorry, I haven't got every. Oh, there she is on my screen now. Yes, sorry, Rebecca. Yes, please come in. Then Marion.
Sorry, Vice Chairman. Would you permit me just to respond very quickly to the comments of the agent?
Yes, please. Yes, if there's clarification there. Yes, please.
Just to say, members, that obviously all planning applications before they're heard at committee go through a stringent process of officers' deliberation. Your officers are required to make opinions and determine applications in accordance with policy, and indeed must do so to make a recommendation to you as members of the planning committee. All those applications and matters are discussed with senior members of the planning team, and obviously are presented to you with regards to our professional opinion with regards to the application site. And there is no individual officer application that isn't assessed by a senior member of staff, and we're in complete agreement about the recommendations on these applications as set out by the officer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. I will now return to Marion, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'd like to thank the planning officer, Fiona, actually, for her extremely hard work on this application. She's put a great deal of time in trying to find a way forward. However, I have to disagree with some points, but she has to go by planning policy, and I have to look at the background and local knowledge. And this is mainly to do with water, which Brecon has had its fair share of since December, Chairman. But because this involves the local plan, I would ask you and members to be patient with me as I provide some background information which they may find helpful. And I'll ask my questions at the end, if I may, Chairman. Thank you. Members, in January 2013, Brecon Council prepared for a new local plan. Sites were called for and Garblesham was designated a local service centre for 34 houses to be provided. I held a public meeting in the village hall with over 70 attendees to explain the various sites and ask for their input. Of the sites put forward, most had several highway constraints, and there were 3 preferred sites by the village and the parish council. The old garden centre on the Hopton Road, half a mile out of the village, was deemed unacceptable, as people would have to use their cars to access the village, and so 2 sites were put forward as preferred. At this time, local plan officers did not consult as to whether the ground was acceptable for housing, though other criteria was met. One paddock, as you've heard, was granted planning permission in 2019 for 7 houses. No more could be insisted upon, as we didn't have a 5-year land housing supply. And so we're left with a local plan shortfall of 28 houses. Extensive land surveys were carried out on the previous application site, and the ground was found, as the report says, to be unfit for construction without deep piling. Officers are insisting on another extensive soil report on this site. And for what? The 2 paddocks sit next door to each other with a fence in between, and the ground would be, in all probability, identical. And I feel that this would be not only a great waste of money, but a great waste of time as well. The problem is not only the ground and deep peat beds and high water table, but the fact that the stream is part of water courses and ditches, which drain water from Uphall and North Lopham 4 miles away, and the farmland on either side of the Kenninghall Road through a barrel arch underneath the main B1111, and from there under the A1066 behind the village shops and the houses on the Hopton Road, leading up to this development site and then into the Little Ouse. All these suffered from near flooding in December. Indeed, the water came up to the back of the village shop. Because this is not a recognised stream, it's very difficult to get the Environment Agency or Anglia Water to do any work, and the responsibility rests with the riparian owners. And yet officers seem to think this land is fit for building. I've always felt uneasy in planning if ground is susceptible to flooding, as do we want to be responsible for house buyers to suffer from flooding, which we were aware of? So I'd ask you not to take account of this insistence that this field can take any more houses than are being put forward today. And soil conditions were a major factor in considering the site next door. The sites have been marketed with William Gaze for a long time with little interest, probably due to the need for deep piling, which would make the sites non-profitable. However, if the large mud house, for want of a better word, were refused, allowing 3 smaller houses to be put forward, making this site up to 13 possibly, and the 2 sites were marketed together, then developers might be interested, and it would provide lower cost housing and 3 affordable houses for the village. It also insists on an LAP. The playing field and recreation ground is 200 yards across the road in Smallworth.
Can I ask, Councillor, if you've got any questions for any officers,
please?
Please
Bear with me, because
Thank you.
Because it's part of the local plan, this is very important. Finally, Chairman, para 122 of the NPPF might say the proposal has to make efficient use of the land, but part of the land is undevelopable and therefore does not stand firm. Members of the committee, I have a recommendation of refusal and recommend approval for the site for 10 houses and refusal for the large mud house, which could then accommodate 3 smaller houses if the applicant felt minded to submit a further application, thus putting Garblesham well on the way to providing its allocation of houses for the local plan. Fiona, my question to you is that the assumption that the entire western half of the site would require deeper foundations is not evidenced. could you tell me why the landowner should have to pay a further large amount of money to evidence this ground, which is part of the field next door? The owners are brothers, and merely divided by a fence, as they were paddocks. This strikes me as a waste of both time and money, and will merely demonstrate the same problems as the field next door. Thank you, Fiona.
Yes, so the report provided is a technical report from AF Howlands, who are specialists in this area. I believe the report covered both the north and the southern site. There's just not enough borehole testing to definitely indicate that, because the different intrusive investigations came up with different results. And that being said, when we ran the viability report, when we allowed piled foundations for all dwellings in all scenarios, and it was saying it was viable. So even with deeper piled foundations, maybe if we did put some dwellings on the west hand side, it did still appear that it was likely to be viable. And I'd also say that there's nothing to stop the eastern half of the southern site for one dwelling actually being developed with 7-8 dwellings, if that's the half that is viable to be developed.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a question for Ms. Malloy, if she'd be kind enough to answer it. Ms. Malloy, it's a very, very large patch of land that the big house is going to be standing on. Can you say why you suggested to the applicant that he puts in this huge house, when in actual fact, 2 or 3 much smaller houses could have been provided on the site?
Yes, the land deteriorates as it goes further south. So where the one bigger house is, the viability is such that piling, which would be deeper at that end of the site for a substantial house, would be a smaller proportion of the development cost, and really not significant in deciding whether a person wanted to build that type of house in that situation or not. Whereas as you go further in the first application site, we've projected that a developer would be interested in doing the piling along the frontage for the smaller houses on the northern site. But as you get down to the south and it gets worse, smaller houses, more smaller houses on that part of the site become less viable because the conditions are deteriorating. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Chairman. May I just finish up, Chairman, by saying that the Parish Council are very keen on this site being developed and smaller, more affordable houses being made available in the village, and that they support the site for 10 houses and would like to carry forward the refusal for the big house in the hope that it may come forward for extra housing. Thank you, Chairman. Right, your time.
Thank you, Councillor, for putting that other side to it. And that was Sarah Roberts who answered your question, not Miss Malloy. We haven't got a Miss Malloy on. I don't know who you're referring to. I've got a question now from Councillor. No worries. Councillor Claire Bowles and then Councillor Keith Gilbert. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, this is just a question or to address the applicant. That you say that you will develop a drainage scheme further down the line, but I find it unacceptable that you've not submitted a flood risk assessment or a site-specific drainage strategy at this stage, especially given what's happened across the county regarding flooding in the last few months. And I feel your responsibility should very much be to comply with policy ENV 09 and supply a drainage strategy at this stage.
Would you like a response?
If you would like to make a response, Ms. Roberts, thank you.
Yes, well, The application was submitted originally with 7 dwellings on it, and during the application process, when this issue arose about the number of trying to put the number of dwellings up, then it was changed to 10. The amount of money that's so far been spent on the application, in terms of testing the suitability of the site physically, we tried to front load that to make the site, as I say, feasible to bring forward for development. That's because the site was changed from 7 to 10. That if that brought it into a major development and requiring the flood risk, that's why it wasn't brought forward initially, because it started off with the proposal for 7 and then changed. But as I say, if there's an indication that the site will be developed, and it's only an outline application, so the strategy would come with the reserved matters application when the actual design is finalised.
Thank you, Ms Roberts. Rebecca Collins, could I bring you in on that, please?
Can I just add to those comments that, members, I would remind you that this, as an allocated site, needs to be considered not only in accordance with your usual housing policies, but also the allocation policy. And Fiona has explained this in paragraph 3.2 of page 21 of the officer report. And as part of the allocation policy, a flood risk assessment is required. And that would remain no matter how many dwellings are on the application site, because it is an allocated site. And therefore we would need the evidence to determine the application. In addition, members, and we've debated this quite a lot recently, you need to be very clear about what are matters of outline planning decisions and what are matters of detail. And therefore what we would usually ask for is an overall strategy for drainage for the site, and then the detail was then compared against that strategy and updated. I'd also like to take the opportunity, if the Vice Chairman doesn't mind, to remind you that as part of the allocation policies, a LAP is required, and therefore there would need to be justification as to why that wasn't being provided on this site.
There we go. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. That answer your question, Councillor Bowles? You happy with that?
Thank you, and thank you for Rebecca for her comments.
Thank you. I have Councillor Gilbert, then followed Councillor Atwell, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Yeah, I do agree with Claire that we do need a drainage strategy, but obviously that can become part of the detailed application. As you know, being in our flood action group locally, this is something that's dear to my heart. But there's things about this application and the report that is worrying me. Have we really got to a situation where we tell landowners and developers how many properties they have to build on a site? Have we got to the stage where we say to people, I'm sorry, you can't build a nice big house and have a nice garden because we want you to build some small ones? I was actually quite intrigued with the large clay lump house. It is something which is sustainable, has been shown over many centuries to be a building system which works, because we have so many clay lump buildings in Breckland and Norfolk, and that actually excites me. But I am particularly worried about saying to developers, no, you cannot build large houses because we want you to build small ones. Thank you.
So you didn't have a question there, Keith. I think Rebecca did answer some of those questions, but she would like to.
It was a question. It was
right,
a
so
question.
I'll bring Rebecca.
Have we got to the stage where we are now dictating to developers that they must build small houses and not large ones?
Yes, and I think Rebecca Collins could come back in and answer that for you, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Yeah, we're absolutely not as officers saying that the type of housing they should build. Obviously, as members and officers, we need to consider the site against adopted planning policies, and that's what the National Planning Framework and Town and Country Planning Act tells us to do. So this is an allocated site. It's an allocated site of 23 dwellings. And it is important that we meet those allocations because that contributes to our 5-year housing land supply and the delivery of housing for the residents across the district based on the assessment that we've done in our local plan. So what we are actually saying that it's really important that we get close to that allocation because that's meeting our future needs, and we've made a very detailed assessment about what our future needs are and where they should be housed. Failure to meet those needs on allocated sites will result in housing development elsewhere that we perhaps can't control, or is a less suitable site or not acceptable to the community that hasn't been consulted upon. And with regards to the size of dwellings, we're not saying as officers, we're saying it's unacceptable that we're not meeting or anywhere near that allocation because of the reasons I've just set out. We're not saying about the size of dwellings, but with regard to this particular dwelling, we're saying to you as officers that we've assessed it. We don't consider it suitable for the character of the area. We think the scale of it is prohibitive to meeting the allocation, which for the reasons I've set out is important. And we don't think it suits the character of areas. Now, obviously, members, you can disagree with our assessment with regards to the design or the character of that dwelling, but as an officer assessment, we all agree that that is out of character with the surrounding area, and it certainly doesn't meet the very high bar of paragraph 79E on the grounds that Fiona has already set out, in that it's not isolated, it's not innovative, and it's not sensitive to its overall surrounding character. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. I have Roger Atwell, Councillor. Your question, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. My question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Is there any more questions? As I scroll my screen, I can't see any more hands.
Councillor Clark.
Sorry, yes, Councillor Clark, can you come in, please, for your question? And to whom?
Yeah, thank you. It's a statement, Mr. Vice Chairman, just to say that in terms of the large clay lump building, I do quite like the design. Obviously, the actual situation may be inadvisable. Other than that, I support the officer's recommendations, which are entirely based on our adopted local plan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. No more questions from any members? Councillor Chapman, I will allow you back for one.
It was just come back in, Vice Chairman, to say that I would gently like to remind committee members that this is a local plan site, and the parish council and the village would very, very much like for as many houses to come forward on these chosen sites as is possible. And if this refusal goes ahead, it's going to leave the village going completely back to the starting line and having to look at new sites, which is going to put us years and years behind any future development. Thank you, Vice Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think everything's been explored, both sides. Appreciate you bringing in the other side, and which I think actually mirrored what the officer was saying in her report. So everybody, can everybody confirm they've heard all of this application in full? Thank you. Right, I'd like to go to the vote now. I think we heard them both together, but I believe we're doing an individual vote. So could I ask you please to raise your hands for a vote on 3PL 2020-05440. If you'd like to, no, we're not raising our hands. We're going to Julie Britton, our Democrat Civics Officer, to ask the roll call for your vote, please.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson.
I'm trying to unmute myself. I'm already there. Should I not leave that to the end just in case there's a split vote or anything else, Chair?
Sorry. And Mike Horn, solicitor, would
Yes,
like
come in.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. To make it clear exactly what we're voting on, I presume what you mean is we're voting for the officer's recommendation or against the officer's recommendation.
Yes, thank you just for emphasising that. I was been dropped in at a deep end a little bit and haven't got a lot of notes, but I should have made some more notes just in case of the situation arose. Okay, then, Julie, can you take the vote, please, members, for the officer's recommendation or against the officer's recommendation?
Councillor Atterwell.
Against.
Councillor Bowes.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Crane.
For.
Councillor Dale.
For.
Councillor Digan.
For.
Councillor Gilbert.
Against.
Councillor Kybird.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Martin.
For the recommendation.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
I'm for the officer's recommendation.
That's 8 for the officer's recommendation of refusal and 3 against.
Thank you. Now we are going to take a second. So that's carried. The officer's recommendation is carried 8 votes to 2 for the officer's recommendation on that one. We're going to take the vote now on 3PL 2020-0559F. Michael, our solicitor.
Yes, just to be clear, it was 8 votes to 3, Chair.
Oh, sorry, I misheard that. 8 votes to 3 for the officer's recommendation. So if you could take the one on that next one then, Julie, please.
Yes, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and again, this one is for refusal.
Yes, for the officer's recommendation of refusal or against the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Atterwell.
For refusal.
Councillor Bowes.
For.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
For refusal.
Councillor Clark.
For the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Crane.
For the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Dale.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Digan.
For.
Councillor Gilbert.
Against.
Councillor Kybird.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Martin.
For the recommendation.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
For the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's 10 for the officer. 10 votes for the officer's recommendation of refusal and 1 against.
Right, thank you very much, Julie. That's members have voted 10-1 for the officer's recommendation for refusal on that item. Thank you. I'd like to thank Ms. Roberts for her time today, and thank you very much. I think I'll hand back now to the chairman to continue the rest of the agenda.
Thank you very much to my vice chairman for that. I think it's crazy that I have a meeting with only 1 application and I was cut out right from the start. But anyway, we got through it. Thank you very much. Obviously, our next item, which would have been Shibden, has been withdrawn from this meeting. So we go on to item 10, which is applications determined by the Executive Director of Place, which is there for your information. And item 11, which is the appeals, which is there for your information. It's there for your information, but Councillor Attawell would like to say something, and I believe it's possibly on Dumpling Green. But anyway, far away, Councillor.
For your powers of deduction, superb, Chairman. Yes, exactly that. Could I just ask Simon Wood a question? On the Dumpling Green application, what lessons do you think his department perhaps would take away and learn from that appeal decision? Bearing in mind it was very controversial at the time and officers were all for it, and it took councillors with the courage of their convictions to recommend refusal for it at the time, in the face of, I would say, not very helpful comments from the Highways Department, who said there wouldn't be any problems either. I'm just wondering what lessons you think we should learn going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Attawell. I haven't had chance yet because I was on leave all last week and tired of the week before to properly read and digest Dumpling Green. I am conscious that it was refused by members contrary to recommendation, and that there will be lessons for us to learn from that. I need to sit down with my team and my managers and go through it in more detail. So all I can do is commit to you that we will fully absorb the lessons from that, and we will bring them forward in future decision making. But I haven't had chance yet to fully engage with the decision, for which I apologise.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll just add to that I don't believe this site is now going to become a wildflower meadow. I would think we're going to see something else happening there. And I hope that the pressure that's been put on to this application from the members will actually resolve to be a better scheme at the very end of it. And I also believe that development to that part of Dereham, along with the new railway bridge and the area through across to the Shibden Road, will come as a whole then, and I think that's where the answer to that will be. But let's hope that what we've done in the past with refusing applications, they have always come back with a better scheme. So let's hope that's what happens. But anyway, something not open for discussion, which is for information only. So I've given you forbearance there. So with that, members, it just leaves me to close this meeting for today. Been a busy afternoon for you all, but I'm sure you've achieved something there. And I close this meeting. Thank you.